This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm not. I'm Charlie Navarrete.
Hi, Charles. Please relax. Get yourself something wonderful to eat and drink. Get anything you want because you have permission. And if you don't need permission, just do it anyway.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marianne. I'll be right back.
You don't move or I will break your legs. And thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me. In the first half, we have our recipe of the week and a report about tweeting from Charlie, who's I don't think has ever tweeted, but that's beside the point. In the second half, I am going to be talking about difficulty breathing as part of our Last Hours of Living series. This is part 3, difficulty breathing, or the medical term for that is dyspnea, difficulty breathing. And in the third half, Charlie's going to introduce a song written for Everyone Dies by Mike Ward. So, Charles, what do you have for us this week? Charles?
Hi, I'm back. Did I miss anything?
Not a darn thing.
All right. So, where are we in the script?
It's your turn. First half.
Well, I started out as a child in the southwest part of Detroit, and then do you want me to?
Which explains an awful lot, Charles.
Yes.
An awful lot.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, do you want to tell us about funeral food of the Midwest?
Yeah, let me do that. So, when it comes to funeral food, the Midwest specialties are casseroles. And well, actually, the Midwest specialty is casseroles. It's Midwest.
Casserole.
Well, for all you grammar experts, let me know. Casseroles, Midwest. So basically, just throw a variety of foods into a Pyrex serving dish, and voila, you have a funeral casserole that will make you queen, king, he, she, they, whatever pronoun you choose, of the funeral get-together. This week's recipe is
I like the idea of you being the queen. I see you very queenly.
I'm sorry, that I would be very queenly, or
you'd be the queen. You'd be the queen of the funeral get-together.
I see.
Yeah. But I digress.
Okay. So, pronoun of your choice, get-together, funeral get-together. This week's receipt or recipe is a spinach mushroom sausage pierogi bake, which is a cream cheese richness added to a mixture of sautéed vegetables and sausage. Pour it all over packaged frozen pierogi, and you have a casserole to die for. Remember, this is the Midwest, so packaged frozen pierogi.
Yes. Although if you're from Hamtramck, you could make your own, right?
Ooh, that's true. Very true.
Yeah.
So there you
So you don't need to go you don't have to go with the Mrs. T's frozen if you don't want to.
Absolutely not.
You just get yourself down to Hamtramck and you buy yourself those fresh puppies.
Yes. Next.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a mother's death. Tweet by tweet. Now, it might seem callous to some while therapeutic to others to follow a dying person live on Twitter. Well, in 2013, National Public Radio's Scott Simon tweeted his mother's last days of life. The first tweet simply stated, "I just want to say that ICU nurses are remarkable people. Thank you for what you do for our loved ones." But quickly, Simon began to grieve in real time from his mother's ICU room to his more than 1.2 million followers. That tweet was retweeted by the Today Show, Esquire magazine, the AARP, among others. For the next few days, he sent sets of 140 characters about the details of his mother's dying days. Tech writers linked to Simon's Twitter feed because they wanted to show what Twitter could do. The GigOM headline read, NPR host's live tweeting of his mother's last moments shows the power of the 140 characters. The first tweets were about her health, but as she deteriorated, he wrote, "I love holding my mother's hand. Haven't held it like this since I was 9. Why did I stop? I thought it unmanly? What crap." As she worsened, mother cries, "Help me," at 2:30. Been holding her like a baby since. She's asleep now. All I can do is hold on to her. Then when she eventually died, Simon sent, "The heavens over Chicago have opened and Patricia Lyons Simon Newman has stepped on stage." Many of his followers shared their own experiences of grief. The weekly news magazine The Week reported a variety of views. Simon should have spent the precious final moments of his mother's life providing love and support. Instead, he spent them tapping away on his smartphone while she suffered beside him. From HuffingtonPost.com, Simon has set an unsettling precedent. Live death videos and photos inevitably will follow. From Salon.com, so what? There isn't one right or wrong way to let someone go. Unfortunately, we Americans have let our cultural squeamishness about death dictate how we mourn, preferably privately and quietly. Megan O'Rourke in NewYorker.com said, "Simon gave us an intense glimpse into an experience usually marked by deep secrecy, using a modern medium to restore something we lost." She pointed out that before the 20th century, mourning was a public act. People would bring casseroles, help to wash the body, sit shiva, or attend the wake. Some would even get to the deathbed in time to witness a solemn and ecstatic moment of death itself. But because most people today still die in hospitals, we've lost that old intimacy with death. The extraordinary response to Simon's Twitter feed suggests that many Americans hunger for a fuller sense of mourning. Grief, we come to realize, is the flip side of love. In the Los Angeles Times, Matt Pierce wrote that before the 20th century, death was much more public than it is today. Funerals often took place in deceased's home. Stoic Victorians were better at death than we are in the age of social media, where anything goes and you never have to look at anyone in the eye. In the 19th century, mourners had ceremony picnics and death portraits, among many ways to express their grief about death. In the 8 years since Simon's tweets, the rise in popularity of hospice care services is bringing death back into homes. People prefer to die at home. Death is accepted more today, but much taboo still exists. In Death, American Style, Larry Samuel states that death has become almost embarrassing, like a mistake of nature that you're going to die, instead of the most natural thing in the world. Cemeteries are on the outskirts of town. Bodies are whisked away. So, please go to our webpage for additional resources for this program, as well as a link to this week's recipe. We hope you will follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and remember to rate and review this podcast. As a nonprofit organization, we are dependent on the kindness of strangers and always appreciate your donations, or you can add a memorial for a loved one on our memorial page. Please go to our webpage to donate in support of our work, www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one dies.org. Marianne, what's
really
in our second half?
Report, Charlie. And I think that part of what we're doing in terms of even just saying that everyone dies points out for those who don't like it and prefer that not be said. They kind of in some way can't get away from it, and especially with COVID and over 700,000 deaths, and with it's just in our face all the time for the last year and a half.
You know what, you're right. So even if someone is not personally affected by a death, Yeah, I mean, yeah, we are inundated by this. 700,000 people have died. I mean, just in America alone. And again, that number, many, professionals, scientists, doctors, the CDC, suspect is way underreported, that many more people have died. But, the official tally is now 700,000 people. And I'm sorry, in the wealthiest nation on the planet, and supposedly the best educated.
Well, I think part of it, we don't talk politics, we don't talk religion, but I think that the situation would have been different in a different political environment if people had received
I agree.
a different message about the pandemic and about the vaccine than the one that they received. But, I can't prove that. But that's
I understand.
I
I understand. Right. Well, but I would add that, yes, the message we received at the start and for a while of the pandemic here in America, I don't know. I just always had enough trust in people's smarts and people's wherewithal to understand, this is a problem. This is a pandemic. This happened 100 years ago. We still have to take flu shots yearly. I mean, just to understand it on a certain level of intelligence, rather than politicize it or make it into some social situation.
Right. And if Bill Gates wants to put a chip inside you, you've already got one in your hand in that phone that you never let go of. So, just keep that in mind. We don't have to have it implanted because we implanted it ourselves. But let's talk about having difficulty breathing. So this is our third in a series of the last hours of living, or what that end of life is about. And we're going to talk about difficulty breathing, otherwise known as dyspnea. So this symptom really warrants aggressive treatment because it's really a distressing symptom. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation where you've been unable to get your breath, either because of illness or because of COVID or because of anxiety. Those are some of the things, some of the issues that are available to us to make it difficult to breathe. It can also be a part of other illnesses like advanced AIDS, anemia, asthma, cancer, congestive heart failure, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, heart failure, pulmonary embolism, anxiety, panic attacks, pneumonia, chemotherapy. So there's a lot of stuff that can make, a lot of diseases that can make it very difficult to breathe, difficult to get that breath in and feel like I'm getting enough oxygen. About 55 to 70% of people near the end of life can have this symptom. And actually, Charlie, for some people, it can be a more distressing symptom than pain. We've all gone through life where we've felt pain of various degrees, depending on what's happened to us. But some people haven't had the experience of having difficulty breathing, difficulty getting a breath and letting it go, that it's like, what the heck is this? And I don't like it, and it's making me very scared, and please make it go away.
So with something like that, I mean, how would what am I asking? I mean, how is that dealt with? I mean, if someone is just in the hospital and can't and can't breathe, I mean, are they given oxygen to help them breathe?
Well, I'm so pleased you asked that because I wrote a whole second half to explain that. So we're looking at.
Good. All right. So, okay.
So sit back, relax,
when
get
you
yourself
hit that,
something good to eat.
I got.
And I will tell you all about it.
Okay, I'll be right back again.
So when we're looking at the symptom, and I say we nurses, healthcare providers, we're looking at the person's histories, what diseases they've had in the past, physical exam, and what's contributing to this. So breathlessness, can be a cause of fear. It could be from, the heart's not working well, so the heart's trying to get that blood to move around. So our oxygen is in the blood, is in the hemoglobin. That moves throughout our entire bodies. And if the heart as a pump isn't moving it around really well, we're not going to be picking up the oxygen from our lungs and moving it around and letting our brain be oxygenated and all of our major organs be oxygenated. It can have a feeling like suffocating or drowning. It's very distressful. You can be exhausted because it's like, oh my God, I'm working so hard to get just oxygen into myself that I'm just, the labored breathing, the chest tightness, the gasping. It's very distressing. And so there are things that can help. And I'm going to talk with you about some things that involve drugs, pharmacological, and some things that are not drugs that you can do without anybody telling you to do except me. I'm letting you know that these are things that are available. Now, one thing that people often I see complain about is like, oh my God, mom and dad can't breathe. They're in hospice. We're talking end of life, so we're not talking at any other point. Remember, let's stay where we are, the end of life. And they say, oh my God, mom or dad can't breathe. They should put some oxygen on them right now. Well, the thing with oxygen at the end of life is that it's not necessarily an intervention that does anything, okay? So unless you're in like a cardiac failure, it likely isn't going to do a whole lot. It has a clear role in treatment of people who don't have enough oxygen. But if a person is non-hypoxic or the oxygen isn't a problem, it's less clear that it really does anything to help with the breathlessness. Now, it's often comforting for the family to see, oh, they have oxygen on, they're doing something. And that's the case at the end of life with a lot of interventions. Families want to see, I want to see you doing something. And putting that oxygen on is seen as doing something. But it can also interfere with the grandkids come over and they want to hug and kiss grandma and grandpa. There's this oxygen in the way. So keep in mind that maybe it's working, maybe it's not. There's no reason not to give it a try because emotionally it might make a person feel better. But we really have other things that kind of do a better job. There's been studies with non-cancer patients that document that there's only a possible benefit. That maybe it has a benefit. But in practical terms, a therapeutic trial is appropriate, it's simple, makes the family feel better, might help the patient. Great, it's worth a try. Now, the other thing is drugs. And people say, oh my God, I don't want to get addicted. And, as a hospice nurse, I want to say to people, dude, you are at the end of your life. You don't really have time to get addicted. This is something that's going to help you feel more comfortable. And I've had this conversation with people all along the trajectory of their disease. They're 90 years old and they're worried about becoming addicted because they read about what's in the newspaper.
My mother.
And that's...
Yep, my mother. They're right there. Yeah.
The point. If you make it to 90 and you're not addicted, then the morphine that I give you to manage your symptoms isn't going to be the thing that does it.
Well, I think too of an older generation, just the idea of more. And that was a situation with my mother. She just remembered, when she was young, people becoming addicted to morphine. And I remember old movies from the 30s and 40s, into the 50s, people being addicted to morphine. So that with her and with other, older people I've spoken with, is just really cemented in their brains. I don't want to say propaganda, but propaganda of and images of people becoming addicted to morphine just stays. And that was the case with my mother. So
that's why we provide education, Charlie. That's why we're not out like playing tennis or doing all the other things that the swells do, like we would be.
The swells, I like that.
That's why we're talking here about this, is because you kind of need to know the facts. And I always told my patients, you're not getting any points for suffering. I have it on God's word that there are no extra points for suffering.
Yeah.
So let's manage these symptoms. So what we use is morphine. These are called systemic opiates, and they're effective and safe. There have been randomized control trials, open trials that show the benefits in dyspnea management, difficulty breathing at the end of life. So the general rules for opioid use in dyspnea are you start with a very low dose and you move up the dose pretty slowly. If you were to give me a dose of morphine, I get drunk on a half a beer. I don't need a whole lot. Somebody else who maybe needs a 6-pack or a case to get drunk might need a bigger dose. But you start slow.
Okay, fine. I've cut back. You don't need to bring that up. I've cut back. Well, okay, fine.
So you start with a low dose, and there's this myth out there that if you give morphine, it's going to stop a person from breathing. And back in the day when I was in nursing school in the 70s, you always counted respirations before you gave morphine because it was thought to decrease breathing. Well, that's only true in the first or second dose, where somebody's called opioid naive. They haven't, used these drugs before. After that, your body says, oh, I know what to do, and it's not an issue. So the dose starts slow. It goes up slowly. The dose is increased according to how much the person needs in order to keep their symptoms managed. Now, you want to have the symptoms relieved first. There may be some sedation, some sleepiness afterwards, but again, that's one of those symptoms that people adjust to pretty quickly and can do a lot of things on a morphine dose that you think, well, they I'm surprised that they're doing so well. So usually,
okay. Well then, so then what exactly then? Okay, so the morphine. Okay, I know it's for pain, but then in a situation like this, specifically about breathing, what exactly then does a morphine do?
Morphine is one of those drugs that can be used for a variety of different things. You're right, Charlie. It can be used to manage pain. But in this case, what we're talking about is using it to manage the dyspnea. And what it does, how it works, is that it lowers the oxygen requirement. So let me give you this example. Let's say you were going to climb up a flight of stairs, and you would need, normally with your, weight and physical abilities, whatever, 10 liters of oxygen in order to climb up those stairs. Now, I'm totally making this up in terms of numbers, but not in concept. Yeah. So then we give you some morphine, and we say, climb up those stairs. Well, you might only need 6 liters of oxygen on the morphine to climb up those stairs. So you can do the same thing with less oxygen because morphine is lowering the oxygen requirement. That's how it works. So that if you want to get rid of that feeling of breathlessness, the morphine says, helps your body more efficiently, let's say, use the oxygen so that you don't need as much oxygen to do the things that you want to do. So it works great. And I've had this conversation like a million times.
Perfect.
Even, people with end-stage heart disease who can't breathe at all. I had a patient once who I'd say, well, he's sitting up, he's puffing. I said, so what what happens if you were to lay down? He said, oh, put my bed down. You can see. I turned blue. And I said, thank you, but no, all I needed you to do was to just tell me. I don't need a demonstration. But that's what happens. Some people, in certain positions just cannot breathe at all. So usually the morphine starts at about, your practitioner in hospice or wherever you're getting your care, usually starts around 5 milligrams every 3 to 4 hours. For older people, it might be 2.5 milligrams. Again, it's a very small amount. And opioids in this case are morphine, oxycodone, hydromorphone, and those can be given IV or by mouth. If the dyspnea is not relieved by, let's say, the 2.5 milligrams every 3 to 4 hours, what they do is they'll increase the dose by 25 to 50% until the dyspnea is relieved, until the person says, oh, whew, okay, I can breathe now, I'm okay. And then that's their dose for them. Now, the thing with morphine is that you can become tolerant to it. It works great. And then at some point you say, man, I've been taking, 5 milligrams of this morphine and doing great. And now I'm taking 5 and I don't feel the same effect. That's because your body sort of figures it out and it says it's not addicted, it becomes tolerant to it. And so all that means is that you need to tell your nurse or your practitioner, hey, you know what, the same dose isn't working as well, and they'll adjust it again. The thing with morphine, one of the great things with morphine is there is no ceiling dose. You don't get to a point where it doesn't work anymore. All you have to do is increase it and activate those opioid receptors, and it'll work again. So that's great. There is an oral concentrated liquid. Morphine or oxycodone comes in liquid, and this is useful in severe dyspnea or if swallowing tablets is difficult, and essentially goes through the same mechanism. It used to be back in the day that they thought, well, it's absorbed under the tongue and it works quicker. Well, then as research did its thing, and they said, nope, it's really going through the same oral process. It's dripping, the liquid is dripping down the back of the throat, and it's going through the same process. It's a small amount, it's a concentrated, medicine. So you can put it under their tongue, and it'll just gently drip down, and it'll do its thing. This is used during episodes of severe dyspnea, you can use, there are other, what I really wanted to start by. So, Sandy, let's just cut that part. So we can use intravenous or sub-Q, right under the skin opioid administration. Not too frequently in hospice, but there may be times when somebody's having severe dyspnea and it requiring a more rapid onset or a more rapid adjustment, or if the patient is absolutely totally unable to swallow, they may use these, the subcutaneous or the IV route. Now, the best thing, the most effective thing, is the pharmacologic medicine. But there are non-pharmacologic.
So better living through drugs.
Through chemistry. Absolutely.
Chemistry, that's where you
get your quotes
chemistry.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have drugs in order to have something to do to help your loved one feel better when they're having difficulty breathing. So some of the non-pharmacologic or the things that don't involve drugs are things like distraction, music, a calming environment. If everybody's screaming at each other in the bed, in the room where the person's dying, now
that never happened, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I've worked hospice, so I know from which I'm talking. Get everybody who's screaming out of the room, because that is not going to help manage that patient's difficulty breathing. Education. I spent a lot of time with patients and families educating. Here is what's going to happen. That's what this is all about. Listen to this. Share this with your family. Share this with the person who's actually at the end of life. Knowing what could happen and knowing that there are ways to make it better helps to calm people. Fear of the unknown creates anxiety. And so you don't have to have an unknown.
Yeah.
We'll tell you everything you want to know. So oxygen can be used. I already talked about that. Positioning, usually sitting upright, sort of bracing forward, if you have a pillow or something, or, like in the hospital, we'd use a bedside table and let them lean over that. Now in COVID, and if you've seen somebody in the hospital in COVID, you'll see that they're in what's called the prone position. They lay them on their bellies because what they found through research is that position sort of gets the heart off the lungs. It makes the lung cavity open a lot better. But that's in real kind of serious acute situations like with COVID. For most people, laying on their tummies when they're kind of wide awake is not particularly comfortable or quote unquote normal. Unless you're a belly sleeper, then turn them around and let them sleep that way. But usually for most people, sitting up, a lot of people love their lazy boy chairs for that reason, because they can sit up and get into the position where they feel some control over their breathing. There's something called pursed-lipped or abdominal breathing. This is when you kind of breathe through like closed lips. And what that does is it increases the pressure in the system and it forces more oxygen into those alveoli. And remember, we've talked about alveoli. They're those little bubbles in your lungs that help collect the oxygen and get it into the bloodstream. So that's called pursed lip breathing. You can Google it. I'm sure there's a video out there about it. But it's just sort of increasing that pressure so that the oxygen can get in. Relaxation, mindfulness, there's all kinds of relaxation. Tapes, how old am I? You can Google and there's these records and reel-to-reels that tell you how to have a relaxation. But you can go online and put in, they even have these mindful meditations for the end of life. They're very relaxing. Spiritual care. Some people are really anxious because, they're at the end of life and they feel they haven't been forgiven or that they've done something really bad. And they're depending on if you've had the wonderful experience Charlie and I have had of going to Catholic schools and being told that, you're going to go to hell for all the things we've done. Sometimes having the priest come in, doing the last rites. I've had many times in hospice where I'll say, somebody's having a hard time. Do you want to have the priest come? And they're like, well, Dad didn't really get into that. And I said, well, sometimes because we've been brought up a certain way, we'd rather hedge our bets and have the priest come, get rid of all of our sins, put the sign of the cross and oil on our forehead, be forgiven, and say, well, in case there is the stuff that we were taught when we were kids, I'd rather, cover all my bases. I'm not saying, I'm not making any comment about whether or not it's true in God or any of that. I'm just saying that there are people who don't believe, but have been brought up to believe, and at the end of life, they want the last rites just in case they were wrong. What were you going to say, Charlie?
That I get, absolutely. If that's what the person dying wants. I've just been in situations where either the person is unconscious or is too weak to really articulate what she or he wants, but the family is like, okay, well, we need to get a priest in here, we need to get a rabbi. This is this is what what Pops would want, when no, Pops has made it very clear throughout, his life that, religion doesn't mean, enough to him that it's going to change anything.
But
and
the
it might
thing
be
is,
intrusive.
Charlie, if Pops isn't awake and can't say yes and can't say no, because like I'm saying, these are people, what people I'm talking about are the people who are at the end that are still awake. It's like, you know what? Let's have the priest come. If Pops were awake, let me finish.
I get that,
but if Pops were awake, he may change
okay.
his mind. But the other part of it is that there are all these other people who maybe in that family have that belief and will spend the rest of their life feeling guilty, like, man, maybe Pops is in purgatory or in hell, and I should have made sure the priest was there. Because sometimes those rites are for the survivors. And if it is no burden to Pops and no kind of skin off his teeth, then sometimes you do things that are for the family. If he's asleep and he doesn't know, then is it really so bad that the priest comes and gives last rites?
In a situation like that, what you just described, he's unconscious, doesn't know what's going on. Absolutely not. I'm just saying if that person's made it clear throughout his or her life, and that person is still cognizant of what's going on.
Right.
No.
But then the survivors can say, you know what? We asked him right up to the end, do you want the priest? And he said no. So kind of like that person who wanted it, but Pop said no, is absolved because they tried to the end. I'm talking about the person who can't say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I'm talking about.
Can't say yes or no. And the family's like, whoa, I know he really didn't want this, but maybe if he was awake, he would. And ooh, which way am I going to go? You know what? Call the priest. In my opinion, it's okay. You're not going to hurt him. And who knows?
Well, and that... Yeah, and that's why we always, talk about preparing, and this would be a conversation to have, in that time when someone is still cognizant and able to speak, for him or herself. So, yeah.
So other things that don't involve drugs could be like a cool cloth to their neck. That feels nice and good. And another thing is a fan blowing on the face. Now, I think you think to yourself, blowing on the face? Ugh. No, what that does is there's a nerve that kind of runs along from your ear to your jaw. It's called the trigeminal nerve. And blowing the fan onto that nerve is calming and sort of decreases the feeling of dyspnea. So it's using the body's own built-in mechanisms to calm them and make them feel better. And you might see in hospitals, sometimes in hospitals they'll have like just a small fan attached to the bed, and that's why it's there, is for people with difficulty breathing, is it can be turned on and blown right onto their face. So I'm not talking about, like the big garage fan in someone's face, I'm talking about just a little fan that's going to stimulate that trigeminal nerve.
Trigeminal? That's what it's called?
Trigeminal. It's a big nerve that can cause a lot of problems if you mess with it.
Okay.
But works really well in terms of stimulating. So the needs of the patient and any patient who's in a terminal situation are symptom relief. So one goal for the family is to be spared distress from watching their family members struggle to breathe. And what I've given you today are ways to make sure that does not happen. It's not necessary. It does not need to happen. Do you have any questions for me, Charles?
Nope, nothing extra. But if something pops in, I will interrupt you,
so
of course.
So, what do you have? What do you have for the third half?
So, in our third half, Detroit-based singer-songwriter Mike Ward has written a song for Everyone Dies.
So I don't know if you ever listened to any of our interviews with Mike Ward, but he's this really cool guy who happened to marry a woman. Well, she was a girl. I went to nursing school with Angie Melisani, and we were a whole pack of people who ran around Hamtramck, and
wolves?
and Ann Arbor and actually a lot of the country together. And and I graduated from nursing school in 78. So I met her in 76. So that gives you a sense of how long I've known her. And Mike's a real talented man. He spent his career in advertising. And then when he retired, he wanted to really do his singing, songwriting stuff. And so we had him on our show to talk about a song that he wrote when his father died. And, he has a lot of themes about growing old and dying because, he's like our age, Charlie, and these are things that are going on with parents dying and that kind of thing. And so he wrote this song for Everyone Dies. And one of the last lines is, spoiler alert, everyone dies. And so, Charlie, what is a spoiler alert? Do you know?
Well, let me pull out the old Webster dictionary. Oh, shoot, I'll just wing it. So basically, it's someone warning that a plot spoiler is about to be revealed. Mike's case is that he is reminding us, in case we don't know, that the plot spoiler in life is that everyone dies. So, Marianne, I know you and Mike recorded a release of the song.
Yeah, Mike was on tour throughout the Midwest and made us stop in Oklahoma, and I was able to have dinner and hang out with he and Angie. And while he was here, and after a few drinks, we'll just leave it at a few drinks, we recorded the world release of his new song, For Everyone Dies. And that is up on our website on Facebook. And so you can go and watch the release there. But Sandy's going to play the song for us now.
We don't all have fulfilling careers, live to ripe old years. Each are born unto this earth, left to figure out our own life's worth. Wrinkled skin, curled up feet, surrounded by wood, brass, and concrete. Deeply rooted family histories lined up in mausoleums and cemeteries. Will you wish that you'd done more? Won a Nobel Prize, bought a Taco Bell franchise. Will you wish that you'd done more? A little exercise, a lot less compromise, 'cause in the end, everyone dies. Yeah, in the end, everyone dies. Old or young, rich or poor, we all be breaking down death's door. No matter your politics or religious belief, we play this song on the last stage of grief. Will you wish that you'd done more? Release some butterflies, learn to navigate the starry skies. Will you wish that you'd done more? Not turned a blind eye to corruption and lies, 'cause in the end, everyone dies. Yeah, in the end, everyone dies. vaporize, eventually fossilize, the final downsize, and get eulogized. Our self is digitized, left here to fertilize after our untimely demise. Will you wish that you'd done more, found less to criticize, learned to bake rhubarb pies? Will you wish that you'd done more, maybe apologize, and don't agonize? 'Cause in the end, everyone dies. Yeah, in the end, everyone dies. Spoiler alert, no surprise, everyone dies.
Do 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 do. Have you heard the song yet, Charles? Well, it's
I have not.
really cool, and you should go listen to it. And the words are also on our website, www.everyonedies.org. And if you'd like, and I hope you do, you can hear more of Mike's work at www.psychosongs.com. That's PSYCHOSOGNSONGS.com. I can't spell.
Oh my God, Marianne.
So it's www.psychosongs.com, PSYCHOSONGS.com. And he calls it his stuff psycho songs because apparently when he plays hockey, he looks like a psycho. But I don't know anything about that. It's just what he told me.
We all need a hobby. So, with that in mind, please stay tuned for the unending escapades of Everyone Dies. And thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, reminding you that death is nature's way of saying, your table's ready.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.